Hi, this video is part of my complete Docker and Kubernetes course. The link is in the description of the video, so make sure to give a thumbs up, and if you don't want to miss any updates, subscribe to the channel. That being said, let's get started. Hello and welcome back. Before we continue with the development of our whole application and with the configuration of our reverse proxy, I just want to discuss in a few minutes how we can actually leverage multi-stage builds here to place all the workflows or all the steps that we need for both development and production images in the same Dockerfile. Before we go ahead, let's just stop both of our Docker Compose projects. In case you have not stopped at the end of the previous lecture, I forgot to stop. Maybe you remembered to stop. So if you did remember to stop, then you can skip this step here. But if you forgot like me, then just stop both of them. Once the services are stopped, let's come back here to our IDE. And the first stage that we have here, remember in a multi-stage Dockerfile, a stage is basically anything that starts with the from instruction, and we can leverage the as keyword here to provide a name for that stage. So this we're just going to call development. I'm going to remove the white lines here just so that we can group the stages a little bit better. And this development stage will stay the same. Basically what we want to do is we just want to install all of the dependencies, copy all the files, and then start our dev server. We would also like to define here the production steps, and actually for the production steps we have two stages, and we're going to say here prod-dependencies. And what we would like to do here is to literally just copy the package and package log.json, and in the npm CI we would like to install here only equals production. That means that no daemon in our case here will not be installed because it is listed under the dev dependencies. This would also be the case for testing frameworks like Jest or Mocha and any TypeScript or other development dependencies that we might have for our project. Let's then come back to our dockerfile.dev, and now we would like to copy the production dependencies from this prod dependencies stage to a distroless stage. So we're going to say here from grc, this is the distroless base image here, that's going to be /distroless /node22, and I believe that's actually node.js22. And we can just define the working directory. So workdir is going to be /app, and then we're going to say here copy -- from. The stage will be prod dependencies, and we would like to copy the /app /node modules under our current node_modules folder. We would also like to copy the source folder into the source folder here. And if you have any test files, then remember you can always come to the docker ignore folder or the docker ignore file here to specify how we can skip these test files. Since we don't have any here, I'm just going to skip this step. So we're going to copy the source folder into the source folder inside of the /app directory. And then our command here is just going to pass the name of the file, and that's going to be source /server.js. Perfect. The last thing I would like to do here is to differentiate between the development and the production stage by naming this here as production. Since this Docker file contains all the instructions for both the development and the production stages, we can then rename this and change from .dev just to Dockerfile. Just before we move forward, let's fix a few typos. I was just going through this file again. This should be GCR, not GRC. Sorry for that. And here it should be node modules instead of just node module. Perfect. So what does this mean for us? We can actually take this Docker file here and build just using the docker build command to inspect how we can differentiate between development and production. Within the nodes backend here, we can then run the docker build command, and let's just pass a tag. We're just going to say here nodes backend dash, and let's pass the tag here dev. And now what we would like to pass here is to use the option target. And this option target allows us to specify any of the stages of our multi-stage Docker file as the final target for our build. So we can just specify development here. Let's copy this and let's paste in our terminal, and let's pass the current directory as the context. The moment we do that and we run this docker build command, you will see that it will execute only the instructions from the development stage. We can then check this image, we can check the history of this image by running docker history and then notes backend:dev. And if we have a look here a little bit more towards the top, we will see that we have our commands as specified in the development stage. So we were able to target a specific stage of our multi-stage Dockerfile as the outcome, as the final stage here to be created in our image. We can do the same for production. We can simply say docker build and let's pass a tag here. So I'm just going to change a few things. Let's pass the tag prod here and the target will be production. And once we run this, we will see that the steps that will be executed are actually slightly different. You will see that we are now downloading our distroless image here. We are then running our prod dependencies step, and then we are running our production steps. If we scroll down a little bit more and we simply run the Docker history, but now with the notes backend:prod, so I'm just going to copy this and paste it here, we will see that we have a very different history here. Now we can see that we get the information from the production stage of our Dockerfile. This enables us to have really just a single Dockerfile that can have all the logic and all the steps that are necessary for both starting up our application in development mode as well as in production mode. Whether you wish to separate this into multiple Docker files or just leave a single Docker file with multiple stages, that really depends on the requirements of your project. But for us here, I thought it would be worth it to explore this concept. We can now open our compose.yaml. Let's change the Docker file to Dockerfile like so. And then we can add an option called the target here, and the target will be exactly the same as before. So we can either define a development target or a production target. We can also define prod dependencies target, but for us here it just really doesn't make a lot of sense, except if we want to just debug some of the dependencies that are installed, because as you already know, in a distroless image here, we do not have shell. So we cannot just run ls or have a look at the directories. Great, so let's save our Docker file here. Let's come back to the terminal and let's see what is going to happen once we run the Docker Compose up. In the terminal, let's clear the terminal. Let's then run Docker Compose and let's run down here to remove whatever is already available. Let's run Docker Compose up with both the build and the watch flags. Let's also split our terminal so that we can send a couple of curl requests here. So the curl request is going to be to port 3001, localhost port 3001. We got the message back, hello from notes. Let's now change our code and we will just come to source and then server.js and let's just add an exclamation mark here. Let's save this, come back to the terminal, and we can confirm that the server was restarted due to changes. Let's see, yes, here are the logs. We are just restarting the nodemon process. And if we were to curl once again here, then we will get back the exclamation mark. Great, let's stop our running containers here. And while they are stopping, let's come back to the IDE and let's open our compose file. Let's change from the development target to the production target. Remember, the target here needs to match the name of the stage. Once we do that, we can then come back once again to our terminal. Let's now try to run once again the Docker Compose up build watch here. And this will leverage the distroless images. So if we scroll up a little bit more until we get the results here, let's see, we got the prod dependencies and the production. That's perfect. Let's scroll down here and let's come back to the IDE. And let's try to change a command, or let's try to change our source file here. The moment we do that and save this, we actually get an error when trying to sync our files. And that is because we are not, so this get ent command here is not available. It's not found. This is a distroless image. There are no executables except from Node and the minimal dependencies that Node needs. Therefore, we are not able to have the hot reloading feature here because this is not really a valid command. Even if this was a valid command, even if this was valid in our container, we would not have hot reloading because we are simply starting our node process with node src server.js. Remember, the distroless image does not start any node daemon processes, it just runs a simple node process. Just to confirm, let's run the curl here and we can confirm that we are still getting the old code back. Remember, we removed the exclamation mark here, but we are still getting the older version. So this is a great way for us to actually confirm that we are able to alternate between both the development and the production targets by just changing one attribute in our compose file. Let's then stop our running containers here. Let's clear, or actually let's close this additional terminal. Let's then come back to the IDE once again. Let's open our compose. We would like to have the development target here. Let's actually have the same logic that we have from this Dockerfile. Let's copy this, paste inside of the Dockerfile of the notebooks backend service. Let's then rename this Dockerfile here. Let's just have the standard Dockerfile, and then the compose.yaml we're going to change from dockerfile.dev. Let's just change this to Dockerfile, and let's add a target here of development. Since we are using the standard Dockerfile name, we can omit this Dockerfile option here. We can just remove this. Let's remove this other one here. This can also go. And then once again, this is an alternative way for setting up the project. It doesn't mean it's always the best way. Sometimes if your Dockerfile gets really big and it's hard to understand what's going on, then separating the Dockerfile and splitting it into multiple Dockerfiles might actually help to understand and manage the project. So I'm just showing you alternative ways of actually achieving the same thing. Perfect, that's it for this little refactoring. Hopefully it also introduced a new concept to you that can be useful in the future. Let's then take a short break and continue in the next lecture.